Hello and welcome back to Bossing English with Mr. F. We're going to do a little video here on how to attack a question basically. We'll look at this question that hasn't come up, could come up, theme question. How does Shakespeare present ideas about betrayal in Macbeth? Alright, so you get that question, you get an extract. That'll have some relevance to betrayal, maybe the moment when Duncan says about there's no art to find the mind's construction in the face, the dramatic irony there of Macbeth walking in and the fact that he's been betrayed already by another Thane of Cawdor. You might get Lady Macbeth schooling Macbeth in in the fact that his face is too open and honest, that he needs to become more Machiavellian and use subterfuge and hide his true intentions behind a cloak or a mask. The famous, look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. They're obvious things, aren't they? I think if I was wanting to go for top marks, and we know that that's an exploratory or a conceptualized response, I'd probably want to approach betrayal in a less obvious or more interesting way in order to show that I've got some other ideas. Now, it's always good if you have got your own ideas or you've read around and you've been thinking about this probably for a couple of years now, and you might have a big idea about what's really going on here and what Shakespeare's trying to do through the character of Macbeth in this play. What message is he conveying to his audience? It's a tragedy, that's a form with a tragic hero, and maybe we could see this as a morality play. That's a medieval idea, but that was still kind of resonating in the Elizabethan period or the Jacobean period, the early Jacobean period as it was in 1605, 1606, and teaching something to its audience or wanting them to experience something in that purging tragedy, tragic sense of the word, Aristotelian idea of a tragedy purging the emotion through catharsis. All right, that's all very well and good, but it needs to be about betrayal. So one way of doing this is thinking like this: betray who or what? So, who? And let's look at the protagonist, Macbeth. It's called Macbeth for a reason. Who does Macbeth ultimately betray? Yes, he betrays Duncan, but ultimately he betrays himself. And that's a much more interesting answer. If we think about his core values, ethical values, moral values at the start, when he was valiant, when he was worthy, when he was loyal to the state and to Duncan, following a chivalric code, a warrior code, he betrays this code of conduct, and we see what happens. There's a kind of punishment linked to that betrayal. In doing so, in terms of the guilt, the sleeplessness, the paranoia, and the bloodletting that emerges from that. He also betrays God. He betrays God. We get a constant kind of subtext of references to God, where he seems to be aware that his sin of regicide is being watched, is being seen by heaven above. Lady Macbeth also has this kind of fear of being seen from on high and maybe kind of instructed to stop and not go through with it. So there's this betrayal of God, and again, what's the sin? What's the punishment for that betrayal? Well, he talks about losing his eternal jewel, his the peace that will come with in heaven, and he knows that, and we get that in the life to come reference in the 1.7 soliloquy, Act 1, Scene 7 soliloquy, where he's kind of contemplating what it would be. Is that right? Let me just double check that. We would skip the life to come. Is that what it is? Yeah, that's it. I think he's aware of the consequences, isn't he? And then we get that in the Banquo soliloquy, where he's talking about to be thus is nothing but to be safely thus, and mine eternal jewel. So he understands the great price to be paid for what he's about for this betrayal. Okay, so you get the idea. Think big and think differently. Okay, so how would I demonstrate that? Well, what references would I use? Well, the Machiavellian Art of Betrayal, I would use this idea of Machiavellian. It's a Renaissance concept. This is a Renaissance play. and that would be a good way to embed AO3 in a kind of nice intuitive way. Earlier I mentioned sin, didn't I, when I was talking about this betrayal as a sin. Here I would be thinking, I'll come to that in a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself here. All right, the Machiavellian art of betrayal, the art of subterfuge. There's no art to find the mind's constructed in the face. That's Duncan. That's why he keeps getting played by both Thanes of Cawdor. Is he gullible? Is this a weakness in his character, or is he too kind, and is he unable to cope with the new world, the changed politics of the medieval world, or the kind of Renaissance world, which is importing these ideas of Machiavel, and is this what Shakespeare is making his audience aware, and even maybe King James aware, that a gullible king is not necessarily a safe king. Look like the innocent flower, we've talked about that. What's really interesting with this quote from Macbeth here, so that's Lady Macbeth, this is Macbeth, who then, having been schooled by Lady Macbeth on what to do, starts to school her. He's the one who says this: false face must hide what false heart doth know. He's the one who kind of, there's a nice word, isn't there? Internalizes, and then her ideas, and then reproduces them. There we are, that's nice A-level type language. Internalizes her argument, her methodology, and reproduces it there. All right, I talked about betrayal as a sin. I'll just change that to a different colour. All right, what AO3? Well, great chain of being, divine right of kings. And we see the consequences of this betrayal in nature, with the horses eating each other, the wild, unnatural atmospheric events that are linked to that kind of disruption, the chaos, divine right of kings. That's why it's a sin. Regicide is a sin because God put the king on the throne. How do we know that they're aware of this? All the way through Macbeth. Stars, hide your fires, let not light. Light here is a kind of metaphor or synonym for God. My black and deep desires. The dunnest smoke of hell, nor heaven peep through the blanket. Heaven, again, a synonym or metaphor for God. Peep through the blanket of the dark to cry, hold, hold. This idea about her acts being disrupted by, angelic ministers in some way. And she doesn't want that, so she asks almost like the devil for the dunnest smoke of hell. I mean, she's speaking to the witches, but the dunnest smoke, a nice superlative adjective there. It needs to be the blackest that it can be to stop heaven. So there's a nice kind of linking between heaven and hell there. So she's aware that she's committing a sin against God there. At the end of the play, Angus makes this, he's the one who comes up with the dwarfish thief reference. Now does he feel his secret murders sticking to his hands? So it's the idea of betrayal and guilt is the inevitable corollary of betrayal. Lovely word that, corollary, just means consequence. And we see all of that with the blood and hands imagery throughout. A little water cleanses of this deed. Will these hands ne'er be clean, Lady Macbeth? Will all great Neptune's oceans? Macbeth again, steeped in kind of metaphorical blood on his hands. The ultimate punishment for his betrayal, as well as not going to heaven, will be the kind of nihilism he feels at the end when his wife kills herself. That's his, earthly paradise, and that's his earthly love. Once she's gone, life it becomes meaningless. All right, how would that look like in an introduction? Well, have a look at this. In Shakespeare's 1606 morality play Macbeth, Shakespeare uses the hubris of its tragic hero to demonstrate the damage done when people use Machiavellian methods to betray their ethical values. By betraying both his valiant principles and worthy loyalty to Duncan and his sacred love of God for a brief dalliance with demonic power, his sins will denude his life of all meaning, the earthly love of his wife, so that would ultimately signify nothing. And then that's my intro. And then I'd probably, depending on what extract I had, because I'd need to work with that, try and have a bit about the Machiavellian art of betrayal, and then a bit on the idea of betrayal as a sin, making sure I zoomed in to the extract where possible in order to kind of make that argument and zooming out, as I have done, to these quotes here, which I think link to my big idea. Hopefully that's been helpful. That's probably it on Macbeth, to be honest. Wish you all the best for next week, which is really this week now. Bye for now. Stay strong. Peace. Mic drop out.